Um, if you've attended any of the other ones, you've seen this slide before with some information about what TPS Fest is. Honestly, new to me. This is the first time I've presented at it or really heard about it, but teaching with primary sources really drew me for a couple of reasons. One, what we're going to be talking about today, veteran voices, veteran stories. I mean, those are primary sources that a lot of students are already working with. And sometimes they don't even realize it. They have students come in or veterans come in for Veterans Day programs and, they have a conversation with them. But what I'll kind of talk about is like, well, how do you go kind of the next step? One, kind of amplifying that, but then also you've then essentially created, if you record it, especially, you've created a primary source. How do you then use that to kind of personalize history? So I really like how this is set up too, as the sessions are not necessarily a full presentation. Mine will not be. We may not go the entire time. I'm going to share a few slides here and there. And then really I want to open it up to what this is all about, discussion, hear what you're doing, ask me more questions about things I haven't covered, but we'll kind of get into that. Some reminders for everyone involved. You already heard the session is being recorded. I don't know if anyone's taking notes or not. I'm happy to take some of those notes at the end when we get into the discussion, though. But this will be recorded. I put my email in the chat, as I mentioned. So any follow-up questions you have for me, I would love to connect with you, especially since if you're part of the session, you're probably doing something in terms of recording or sharing, preserving veteran stories. So those are the reminders. And then we can just jump right in. So welcome again. My name is Mason Farr. I am the Education and Outreach Manager at the National Veterans Memorial and Museum. I'll probably refer to it as NVMM for a little bit shorter, but I am based in Columbus, Ohio. So right in downtown Columbus, if you're at all familiar with it, we're right across the river from kind of our Civic Center area. That is an image of the museum kind of at dusk. Really interesting architecture to the museum. And we've been there since about almost 7 years. October of 2018 is when we opened, with the designation by Congress as really the only museum that is dedicated to all veterans. So it's all branches of service. And it's not just Ohio veterans. We're also for veterans from any other state in the country. We share stories of veterans from 1775 through today with the historical timeline, and then some other features I'll kind of discuss. And I'll talk more about specifics of the museum on the next slide, but this just gives you a little background on that. As the education manager, I do all things K-12 programming. So that would be all of our field trips, both in person and virtual, different types of initiatives, namely what I'll be talking about today, our story collection initiative, but also just educator resources. So always trying to take, our mission and take that into the schools is kind of the big focus of my work. And also I do some public programs, and we're a large looking museum, but we're a pretty small staff. So, as many of you know, doing a lot of different things. And today I really want to talk about, how do you bring veteran stories into the classroom with some of our resources. So, what is NVMN? You see our mission there. It's to honor all veterans, elevate their stories, and amplify the power of service for everyone, everywhere. And so it's somewhat broad in that way that, we're there to share the stories of veterans, but it's not just a museum for veterans. It is certainly a museum for veterans in the sense that their stories are preserved there and are highlighted there. But most of our audience that comes into the museum, and certainly all K-12 students, are not veterans. So we're really there to kind of bridge that gap between veteran experience and civilian understanding. The way we do that is through storytelling. Primary sources are a form of stories, and that's really what we're focused on. So sometimes people come into our museum and they're a little bit surprised to see that where are the tanks, where are the planes, the trucks? In some museums, they have those that purpose. Just down the road from us is the National Museum of the U.S. Air Force. They have hangars full of that. We're focused on the stories. The individuals who flew the planes, who loaded the trucks, who fixed the tanks. So we really want to highlight all of these different experiences and help people connect to those stories, and then just as importantly with veterans in their community. So this is what I sometimes do with every group that visits the museum, whether it's kindergarten, high school, adults. I always like to ask everyone in the group, and I'll do it here, and you can use the little hand feature. Raise your hand if anyone with us today is a veteran or is actively serving, in Guard and reserves. And that's okay. No hands go up for that because my hand didn't go up either. I'm not a veteran. I've worked for the Army as a civilian. But this next question is raise your hand if someone in your family is a veteran or is actively serving. And I know, Jeanette, you already put your hand up initially saying your father's a veteran. But that's where my hand goes up. Two grandfathers who served during World War II era, Korean War era, an uncle who served during the Vietnam War era. They're all in different branches. But those are the people, I think about closely when sharing these stories. And then I have the last question I always ask, in case no one in your family has served, raise your hand if someone you know. It could be someone at your university. It could be, okay. It could be someone it could be students, if you're at a university, there are a lot of obviously students who go back to school that way. It could be colleagues, neighbors, and that's what's always really fun to see when I have younger groups, especially if somebody came with them who is a veteran, and everyone's hand is up by the time I've asked this third question, but it's cool to see them. Yeah, that individual right there who came along with you on this trip, they are a veteran. So that's what I always try and do with any group is make that personal connection that we all know someone who served. We all know a veteran. They're in our lives, they're in our families, our communities, at our universities. And this museum is for them. And so how do we hit our mission? How do we follow that as a storytelling space? So before I go further into that, I do want to share this video and let me know if the audio doesn't work. It's about 7 minutes though, but I think it's an important video to show because it really leads into, the type of work that we do. So I'll give this a try.
I'm very proud of the 26 years I served this country in uniform.
Oops.
I'm very proud of the service in combat. And I think the majority of the veterans I meet feel the same way. And so when people thank us for our service, the answer is it was an honor to serve.
For me, service is a reason to get up in the morning, and I want to do as much for as many people as possible.
Many of us, as Americans, we're born with our freedom. We're born with our citizenship. I think when you take that oath, it's not just something that you were born with anymore. It's something that you have decided to do.
I stand on the shoulders of men and women for hundreds of years that have felt more pain and even death trying to preserve our freedom.
I just want the people to know that freedom is not free, and if it wouldn't be for the Allies winning that World War II, if they hadn't won it, we wouldn't even be here, period.
The Americans who fought here that morning knew word of the invasion was spreading through the darkness back home. They felt in their hearts, though they couldn't know, in fact, that in Georgia, they were filling the churches at 4 a.m. In Kansas, they were kneeling on their porches and praying. And in Philadelphia, they were ringing the Liberty Bell. Gentlemen, I look at you and I think of the words of Stephen Spender's poem. You were men who in your, quote, lives fought for life and left the vivid air signed with your honor.
Knowing a little history that my great-grandfather was in the military and died in World War II, and going along in life and learning that he did die there, that was another sense of pride that I realized, hey, this is a military family, so might as well keep it going.
I'll never forget in boot camp and recruit training, it was drill instructor Staff Sergeant Titus points up to a plane that's flying above us, just a commercial airliner, and he says, you see the people in that plane up there, the people in that plane? They have no idea that you're down here right now. They have no idea of the challenges that you're going to face. But The reason why, they can sleep at night is because you choose to stay awake.
My name is Brian Vargas. I was a Lance Corporal in the Marine Corps, and I served from 2005 to 2009 in Operation Iraqi Freedom.
My name is John Flynn. I'm a proud Vietnam veteran.
Mickey Ganich, age 97. I'm a proud veteran of the United States Navy. My name is Wallace Levin, and I served in the Army Security Agency during the Korean War.
My name is Jazz Booth. I served in the United States Army for 17 years as a human resources officer, and I am a proud woman veteran.
My name is Tom Cunningham. I am a combat Navy corpsman veteran of Vietnam, and I am proud to be a veteran. And I'm proud to be an American.
I think the Army was one step for me, and my military career was one step for me to get closer to selflessness.
To help others, regardless of who they are, regardless of circumstance, that feeling is something I had never had before until I joined the service.
In your hands, my fellow citizens, more than mine, will rest the final success or failure of our cause. Since this country was founded, each generation of Americans has been summoned to give testimony to its national loyalty. The graves of young Americans who answered the call to service surround the globe.
The guys my age, if they were suicidal, they're gone. The guys my age, if they were drinkers, they're gone. The guys that looked at it and said, there was a reason that we were spared. So come back and do something good because you were given the chance.
People would find service as a teacher, or once again as a good parent, or as a cop, or just a good citizen. We can make things so much better by serving each other.
I think service is the common bond. There's no gap between veterans and civilians when you're serving together.
One thing to just never underestimate or never forget is the power of human connection. The power that we have to shape and influence the lives of one another.
Now the trumpet summons us again, not as a call to bear arms, though arms we need, not as a call to battle, though in battle we are, but a call to bear the burdens of a long twilight struggle, year in and year out, rejoicing in hope, patient in tribulation, a struggle against the common enemies of man, tyranny, poverty, disease, and war itself. The energy, the faith, the devotion which we bring to this endeavor will light our country and all who serve it. And the glow from that fire can truly light the world. And so, my fellow Americans, ask not what your country can do for you, ask what you can do for your country.
All right, so that's just kind of gives you a little bit of context about the museum. That is our service cube. As you go into the museum, it's kind of broken up into a few different components, but the main part is our historical timeline that is just stories from 1775 through today of individuals who served, and then ideally sharing, what did they do after? Because we're not just focused on military service. We're trying to show that whole journey. And that's what that video is based on. So then we have another part, you go along the timeline, across from that, we have these thematic alcoves. And those are all based on stories and recordings, just like you saw, where when they were creating the museum, just through, who people knew, there's some connections through PBS, with American Veteran. So you'll see some of these faces in other places too, but basically they sat down for a long interview, about 25 different individuals from all branches of service, aside from a Space Force, because it was not in existence yet. And they sat down, they had a conversation about, what does it mean to serve? And that's kind of what you get as you go through. And that's what kind of led into the story collection and really what I want to focus on today, because we're not really a collecting institution. As I mentioned, we're not really full of artifacts. The artifacts we do have are on loan, but again, we're focused on the individuals who would have used those things, or experienced certain times in history. So how do we collect? We can collect stories. And so that's been kind of an ongoing thing we've worked on at the museum. And it's taken some time to get there, some starts and stops, but as of the end of 2024, we were able to partner with StoryCorps. You may be familiar with StoryCorps. They're a nonprofit based in New York City, and their whole mission is to, encourage conversations between people. It can be friends, it can be family members, a way to, preserve a legacy. They also do different programs where specifically two people from different parts of the country come together with different beliefs. They come together and they talk about it. Another one that's very important to us that we're really, that's where our partnership kind of comes in, is through their Military Voices initiative. And that whole focus, again, is on sharing military voices. And when we talk about, who contributes to that, because as part of that, we've created basically a special archive with them called the NVMM Story Collection that's both on our website. But what's really important is if we're going to collect these stories, we need to be mindful about how we're doing that and that they are accessible. So when we collect them, we have one, the individual who records it, and there's a free recording. You get that. It also goes to the Library of Congress, the American Folklife Center, and it's preserved there indefinitely. So a few different areas where it goes, and it's kind of up to the person who's leading the conversation, recording it, who has access to it. But we know that they're there and they're accessible. So that's why it's really important for us to partner with StoryCorps. And when we talk about, whose story goes into this collection, it's not just veterans specifically, as in, you have to have a conversation with a veteran. There are many organizations that do that. And it's, a wonderful mission. Where we're starting to go a little bit broader is, the veteran experience. So it's not just that one individual. We talk a lot about the family members. So we want to be able to be a place where military children out here in Ohio and many states have Purple Star schools that try and support and welcome students who their family members are in the military and they're moving from place to place. So sharing their stories, places they've been, challenges they've had, successes, the most fun place they've been. So we want it to be a place for that too in this collection. And then really anyone, I mentioned I'm not a veteran myself. My grandfather has since passed away who served, both of them. I could talk to my parents about their service, and that would be something that can go into our collection here. And so as we were doing that, what we wanted, obviously, I'm the education manager. I wanted to focus on how do we get this into the hands of students, into teachers' classrooms, knowing that, and I'm sure in your local communities, especially around Veterans Day, a lot of schools and classes bring veterans in who are comfortable talking to students and willing to answer their questions or share their stories. So that's already going on throughout Ohio. And so I looked at this as a way to say, well, how do we, if you're not in the room with that veteran, you're not going to hear that story. You're not going to be impacted by it. And as you heard from the video I played, a lot of it's inspiring to hear that. And, we're not telling people to go into the military, but we are encouraging them to serve in some way. And there's many ways to do that. And it starts with that inspiration from hearing from someone who served in the military. So that's kind of what we want to do, is put it in the hands of students. And so last summer I worked with teachers from a local high school as well as a local middle school. who visit us quite a bit on field trips and expressed an interest in always helping with anything we did. And so they love this idea. So we got together throughout the summer and created the NVM story collection toolkit. And essentially that talks educators through how do you, like, who is the NVMM? Who is StoryCorps? Why are we doing this? Where do these conversations go? How do I set up an account? And then it ties it to learning standards, both here in Ohio and some Common Core standards, because everyone knows, conversations, you get a lot more from that in terms of active listening, just social skills, considering other people's perspectives. So we want all of that to be a part of it. Kind of what we found after doing that last year was the toolkit's great, but it's a lot. And so where does this fit in with what schools are doing? So some teachers have the capacity to say, we do a heritage project throughout the year, this can fit in there. But more trying to figure out, how do we get that into the classrooms? And there have been different ways, and I'm excited to hear from both of you if there's anything that you've done or ideas that you have. But some different ways we've done that is certainly with Veterans Day in Ohio. There's a part of the Ohio Revised Code that schools have to recognize Veterans Day in some way, with a program, with a presentation. So this fits right in with that. But we also do that for Vietnam War Veterans Day, where we reach out to schools and they create welcome home signs and come in. We'd love to get more kind of intergenerational storytelling that way. We have military signing days here. So, when kind of going beyond individuals who served, how about the individuals who have committed to service? So I've been in conversations with a couple different groups about that, talking to those students and seeing if they share their hopes, their dreams, what they expect, what they think they'll be surprised by, why they're joining whatever service it is. So we're trying to just come at it from all different angles that way, which is kind of what I'd like to hear from you. And where it all goes is into our story collection archive. And so I just have a screenshot of a couple of conversations took place at a local high school, or this was a middle school last Veterans Day. They had a Korean War veteran as well as a World War II veteran who was able to come into the school, and they recorded the conversation and then sent it to me, and I was able to upload it into the story collection with their approval. But these don't have to be long conversations. I mean, really our goal here is don't make it harder than it already is. I know, with the Library of Congress, they have the Veteran Voices Project or History Project, and I think it has to be at least 30 minutes long. There are a lot of different components to that. For us, it's kind of based on, you've come to the museum, maybe now you raise your hand, someone who served. How do you start a conversation with them? What types of questions might you ask them? And so we're kind of in the process of setting up, how do we get that into the schools? And that is kind of where I want to take our conversation here and open it up to anything that you would like to ask about, or ideas that you've had. Some things that come to mind for me to kind of kick things off are obviously teaching with primary sources. So it's a research opportunity. We want to put this in the hands of students to say, you're going to be speaking with someone who potentially served in World War II. Obviously, that's getting less and less, but it's amazing how often we do hear about a community that has a World War II veteran. But, Korean War, Vietnam War, and more recently, the veterans our community served more recently. Put that in the students' hands. Like, what do you want to know about them? How do you ask appropriate questions, I think is really important. And maybe, Sean, you'll be able to speak to that, kind of as you mentioned up front. Also, we're, as I mentioned, looking into, how do we elevate student voices as those primary sources? And I really love the idea of, you talk to someone who served during the Vietnam War, you hear a little bit about their experience, whatever they'd like to share. And then maybe you do that in November, and then the curriculum gets around to Vietnam War in March. Now you're kind of reading through the textbook and whatever else, and then you pull in those conversations. The students were the oral historians for, and that you're actually hearing from someone who maybe personalizes and humanizes the history a little bit more. So with that, I'll pause. So I'm not speaking the whole time, but I'm curious, is there anything that you're doing? I think is maybe the first place to start. Is there anything that you're doing with this type of collection of veteran stories, how you're sharing them out? If you've worked with students on that before, I'm curious if that's something you've done. And that I'll kind of I'll stop sharing my screen.